the issue. They will decide the issue. But if the law is clearer, then the outcomes become more predictable, more consistent, fairer, and more effective, and that provides guidance for all the actors in the executive branch and even help to the legislative branch. So I think what we need is for Congress to get in the game and to work sort of in a tag team fashion with the courts. I also think that no one else can do it. You can't count on the executive to make a judgment for the whole society. In a democracy, a Republican form of government, really only the Congress is the legitimate person to assess these competing considerations and strike a balance. They're not perfect, nobody's perfect, but they're the right people to do it, and I hope that they will. I think that they're certainly moving in that direction. Last thing is, we've talked a lot about some of the output of the Church Committee, but there were a lot of statutory reforms that we haven't really talked about. And for example, limiting the IRS from being abused for political purposes. That was enacted in statutory form, and so were some other reforms. There's more that can be done in that area as well. There was an effort to develop a charter for the FBI, which was done cooperatively by the FBI and the Justice Department. It was mostly written by Inspector John Hodis and me. And it got way down the track with approval from the Carter administration, the Attorney General, the Director of the FBI. And at the last stages, it sort of got pulled from consideration. I think there's good potential to enact charters for the key agencies that would set a broad framework within which specific statutes, specific guidelines, specific oversight can take place and be more effective than it has been before. I also think there's a good role for guidelines, but again, guidelines have to take place in a context, and the context most broadly has to be set by Congress in statutory form. That's the single biggest thing that we need to improve the quality of the restraints on the intelligence community's activity. And I actually think, from having spent many years as a criminal investigator involving public corruption, as you have heard, that the intelligence agencies will not only be able to observe appropriate civil liberties, civil rights, privacy interests, but will actually become more efficient and more effective against real terrorists if we move in this direction. So it's not a question of give up safety so we can have privacy. You can have both, but it takes smart laws and it takes constant updating because the whole thing's a moving target. The technology's changing a mile a minute. So Congress has got to get in the act. The courts need to step up. I think they are. I think they will. And I think that, like the Congress, there's a sort of a special role of judges. They're appointed for life. They're non-political. They are like monks in days of old. They're removed. They're very independent. They're very detached. They're not emotionally wrought up in the dispute. They're fallible like all other humans. But if you have to pick who should be a referee of whether something is legal or not legal, given what the statutes say, what the Constitution say, there's no better alternative than federal judges. So let us play our role, let the Congress play its role, and we can advance this ball a great deal very rapidly.
And as a federal law enforcement officer, as an FBI agent, I can say I agree with you entirely. I never found bad guys by investigating people who were innocent. And I think that's something that's missed in this. Peter.
Yeah, Mike, first of all, my hat goes off to you and to the Brennan Center and to Fritz and the whole staff. This has been an incredible day. You've done so much work to prepare for it. I know you're going to do a lot of work after it's over, but this is a public service, and it comes at the right time. And even with us gray hairs up here, trying to make sense of some of it. I come from the political sort of public side of this. In addition to the time spent on the committee and the time spent in Senator Church's office, I've worked for 3 decades to elect candidates to office. Failed with this fella in Utah, but Democrats in Utah don't tend to do too well. But Pat and I have been great buddies for a long, long time, even before the Church Committee. But, and so one of the things that concerns me a lot is how do you bring the public into this? How do you move the ball down the field when you've got some very complicated issues, when a lot of it's secret, when people haven't studied it and thought it through, and when you have, I hate to say it, but elected officials who tend to act very quickly when push comes to shove, and they may not make the best decisions on Sunday when they vote on this. And I wrote a column, partly at your urging, where I said, I think we have got to get it right. I think it's really difficult when you pass the Patriot Act in the heat of passion, and folks who are not terribly competent on some of these issues, read the Congress, are making some of these decisions. So, I have, there are two things that a lot of us have talked about. Politically, I understand that they're tough, but folks should call for a new church committee in the Congress made up of people on the intelligence committees, on the Homeland Security committees, people who have a real interest in understanding and passion for this subject, and to sort of step back and look at it. At the same time, my view is, and I expressed this in the White House, because as a political consultant, somehow I get in there, and I've said to folks, you should have a Simpson-Bowles type commission to look at the intelligence agencies. They should have subpoena power. They should have really solid, good people on it, real serious folks and serious staff. And we should begin to look at some of the questions that Paul just laid out. We should look at what we need to do with the FICE Act. We should really look at what the role of certain judges are. We should take a real good hard look at what the executive does with IGs and with whistleblowers. If we are shutting down in this country people who are concerned and have moral questions about what our policies do, if they're looking and they can't come and say, we're torturing people overseas, they just destroyed these tapes, they shouldn't do that. Then we're in real trouble, because when you're spending 50 to 70 to 80 billion dollars, including the military money, over 107,000 staff people in the intelligence field now, plus the folks out there who are and the contractors, and they're building this multi-billion-dollar facility again in the state of Utah to suck in all this information that they gather. Somebody who has questions shouldn't have to travel to Russia and to let it all out. I mean, we should figure out a way to make these people not pariahs, but folks who are doing their jobs. So, I think that, and I'm not a waif, and I'm not a political idiot. So, I know that some of those, the second church committee isn't the easiest thing to get done, or to have a presidential commission. But, I hope that this, that if this president doesn't do it, that the next president does and gets really serious about it.
And I think that's why you're right, that it's the public education part that's so important and that we're trying to accomplish here with your help. Because once the public puts that pressure on the politicians, whether it's the executive branch or
And I will tell you one quick thing. I just, about an hour ago, did a little interview with Steve Scully from C-SPAN, the wonderful folks who were here taping this. And Steve played for me about a 2-minute bite from Frank Church from 1975 on Meet the Press. And I'm sure will be on C-SPAN. I thought to myself, holy cow, he could have said that yesterday. Talk about the looking inward, the precisely your words about what's going to happen with our technology, that it's getting greater and greater. We're going to be able to. So, yeah, I mean, and the public needs to think a good deal more about it.
And we have a Rethinking Intelligence project that if Fenn Communications wants to provide some.
Pro bono. I'm old enough. I just do pro bono stuff anyway.
Patrick.
Mike, I hope that you will become the next director of the FBI. It would be refreshing.
Yeah, right.
I don't think that's likely.
And in Utah, if I can help somebody, I say that I will oppose them, so I'll
Yeah,
oppose. And then I do want to thank Fritz and Bill Miller. Fritz Schwartz, he and I have not always had a harmonious relationship when I was on the committee. And Bill
Hell,
was-
Pat, you haven't had a harmonious relationship with your friends who worked for you. No, Pat,
Well, no,
he's
I-
Irish, you know.
Yeah, I mean, when Peter helped me on the campaign, my opening line running for governor as an Irish Catholic Democrat in Mormon, Utah, was, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help you." And in 1992, that got the same response as it would today, unfortunately. And I think just what happened to me the other day, yesterday when I arrived, in 1969, it was the first year I was here in Washington working as an intern for Senator Moss, a Democrat from Utah. And I landed at Dulles, a new airport at the time, and I kept thinking of John Kennedy's "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country," and Martin Luther King's statement, "I have a dream." And there was this sort of positive aspirational aspect to government. People believed that we could make a difference. The other day when I got into Reagan Airport, all I could hear was the House of Cards theme music. And I think that really captures what's happened in these 40 years. We've let Hollywood, in many ways, define what we consider to be political reality. And as a criticism of the intelligence community, I think they watch too many movies and don't get enough experience. Some of the people that we worked with, Seymour Bolton, Wald Elder, had actually been in the field. Seymour had been captured in the German war and put into the prisoner of war camp and organized it. Senator Church had been an intelligence officer in China. So they had firsthand experience. And the idea in the 21st century that we have a war on terrorism, which is an oxymoron to me, it's absolutely ridiculous. It needs to be, and should have been in 2001, a police action. Police are under better control than the military because Ike Eisenhower, who's emerging as one of my favorite presidents, understood the power of the military-industrial complex. And when you're talking about billions of dollars, and when you're talking about political appointees, I was a presidential appointed, Senate confirmed. The average life of one of them is 18 months. I can remember at BLM, where I got to deal with wild horses, having a senior official who supposedly reported to me, looking at me and said, "Look, I'll be here long after you're gone, so I'm not going to do that." So I think we need to think about an ecosystem, but the problem I see with the ecosystem that has developed in the security state, it's a monoculture. And in biology, monocultures don't survive very long. They do come in as an invasive species, they do take over the landscape, but then they fail because there's a lack of diversity. Now, each time I've worked in Washington, and it's been 7 different times, I've had a letter of resignation, or I had a conversation with Peter where after I had told one member of the committee that he was just not really with it, Senator Church reminded me that that's not a way a staff person talks. I go back outside the Potomac Village. And I think in the Potomac Village, there are each of these tribes that are more interested, and this certainly was true in BLM, in defending their turf against, for instance, the Forest Service or Fish and Wildlife Service or DOD, CIA, NSA. They're all sort of mixed together. And the other thing, Margot, I don't know if you're still here, but the one thing I really would disagree with you on is more people in the pie. When I came to Washington in '69, there were 2,500 staff people in the Senate. Today, there are over 10,000. In the House, there were 10,000. There are now over 30,000. And the 10,000 included the Library of Congress. So we've had this explosion of staff on the Congress side. And I would suggest to you, with all due respect, and Your Honor, I do agree that the courts are a very good place to adjudicate conflict. But you need to have a Congress that's going to be a Congress. And I don't think, I mean, the joke when I was in BLM was that there's only one system now, and it's appropriation process. The authorization committees don't matter. But the appropriators, man, you kiss their ring because they control your budget. So the only place I do want to talk specifically about the Church Committee is I think we had a unique opportunity, and I think we took maybe 3/4 of that opportunity. We did prove to the public that there were abuses that were going on, whether it was assassinating foreign leaders, COINTELPRO, NSA probes. But what we didn't do, in my judgment, which was a missed opportunity, was set up a predictable budgetary process and make sure that the chain of command was traceable. Because we can see, even today, that the agencies are so good at fluffing over things that who's responsible for spending those dollars or who's going to be accountable. The CIA, Walt Elder was a historian, and every time there was a covert operation, he had to write up a history report where he interviewed the people there and determine whether they were successful or unsuccessful. And I think that kind of accountability, first internal to the executive branch, and then in some way reviewable by an independent body. I think since Citizens United, I'm not convinced Congress is going to be independent because the moneyed interest. When I ran for the Senate against Orrin Hatch, and I ran on the bus theory, he had to get hit by a bus before I could get elected. But you know, when somebody hands you a check for $10,000 or $20,000, it's not because they like your curly hair or your Irish demeanor. It's because they want something out of you. And now that there's unlimited spending, and unfortunately Peter makes good money off of this, the system
Pro bono now.
yeah, pro bono. But it's a system that is broken, and we need to have some accountability. But finally, the most important thing is I teach at the University of Utah, and it's interesting to me to see, I've been teaching for 35 years now, how events that were very real in my life, Watergate, for instance, the impeachment of President Nixon, are now as relative to my students as World War I was to me when I was their age. And you could ask me at their age what I thought about World War I, and I could give you some very general ideas. We're failing in transferring the sense of responsibility. And some people have said, Tom Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation, I'm afraid if we don't change our way, we may be known as the least generation.
I said this last night, and I'll repeat it here. You know, as a young FBI agent, having read and internalized the reports that you guys worked so hard on, really set me on a course to keep the straight and narrow. And it was so nice to hear Alex Joel say that he has copies at his office. I think it's very important. And there are a lot of employees within these agencies who want to do the right thing and want their agencies to be effective and efficient. And we have to figure a way to empower them and to make sure that they're able to work within this system so it can work well. And the commitment of this group of people for over 40 years now is inspirational. And thanks very much for the work that you've put in and continue to put in. And I'm going to continue calling you. So thanks very much to the church committee staff.
Have Chris and Bill stand up and look.
And if Chris Schwartz and Bill Miller, if you wouldn't mind standing and taking a... And of course, thanks to Vice President Mondale and Senator Hart for coming this morning. That was a terrific addition to the program. And thanks to all of you for coming, and thanks to C-SPAN. Good night, everyone.
Oh, perfect.